I had a client come to me for anxiety. She arrived 15 minutes early, which I noticed. And what I noticed next was how she talked. Warm, quick, already filling in the context before I'd asked. Filling silence before it had a chance to form. 10 minutes into intake, she was crying. Not gently. Her breathing went shallow, her sentences fragmented, and every time I asked a question, she circled back to the same argument from the week before. Same argument, same words, as if the answer to it was somewhere in the repetition. She wanted to be there, and she believed in the process. She wasn't ready. That distinction is what this episode is about. There are 3 things I want you to walk away with today. What readiness actually looks like in a client, the 3 conditions that have to be present for a session to work, and how to track those conditions when they shift mid-session. Let's get into it. Readiness is not enthusiasm, and it is not showing up, and it is not even wanting to change. It is something specific the nervous system either has or doesn't have in a given moment, and most certifications don't teach you to read for it. After 16 years of full-time practice, this is the variable that determines what a session can actually be. Not what you planned, not what the client hoped for, but what is available right now in this body on this particular day. This is Chapter 18 of Advanced Hypnosis, link below. There's a reason a client can be wanting change, hopeful about it, present in the room, and still not be able to do the work that day. It comes down to 3 conditions: desire, grounding, and belief. All 3 have to be present. Not perfectly and not fully, but enough. Desire is the internal engine. The client has to be there for themselves, not for the appointment they made 3 weeks ago when they felt worse than they do today, not for the spouse who finally convinced them, and not for you. When a client is there for someone else's reason, you can feel it in how they answer. The answers are cooperative and they give you what you're asking for, but they don't go anywhere. Grounding doesn't mean calm. I see emotional clients every week who are fully grounded. They can hear a question, sit with it, and answer from somewhere real. What they're feeling is big, but they're present inside it. What grounding actually means is that the nervous system can receive. It can take something in and hold it, and when it can't, you'll know. The client loops. They hear a question and redirect to what they needed to say instead. And the words land, but nothing holds. Belief is just a crack in the door. It doesn't have to be confidence or certainty. It just has to be enough of an opening that the subconscious doesn't automatically reject what's being offered. A client who has tried everything and believes nothing will work is not unavailable. They just need a different entry point, something small, something their body responds to, before the skeptic in their head has time to object. When any one of those 3 is missing, the session you plan changes. A hopeful client who isn't grounded can't do the work yet. A grounded client who doesn't believe will sit through the session without letting anything in, and a settled, trusting client who doesn't actually want to change will cooperate without engaging. There's one signal practitioners overread: hope. A hopeful client is not a ready client. Hope tells you the door isn't fully closed, and that matters. But hope without clarity is a setup for disappointment. If a client believes hypnosis will fix them in one session, the hope itself becomes the obstacle, and when the session doesn't match that picture, the disappointment compounds everything else. Now, they have one more thing that didn't work, and the belief that was already thin gets thinner. You're not there to dampen hope. You're there to ground it. Because hope connected to a realistic picture of the work survives the discomfort that comes with real change, and hope connected to magical thinking collapses the moment the work gets hard. The most useful question you can ask in intake is simple: why now? Not why do you want to change, but why now? What moved this from something they'd been thinking about to something they actually did? Sometimes the answer is a specific incident. Something happened, a line was crossed, their tolerance was exceeded, and they reached for something new. That kind of desire is strong, but the nervous system may still be activated by whatever triggered the booking, and you're going to need to ground before you can work. Sometimes the answer is inspiration. They heard something, read something, talked to someone who had a good result, and belief has a foothold and curiosity is present. The question is whether the desire underneath is specific enough to work with. Sometimes someone else initiated, a spouse, a parent, a doctor. The client is there physically but not internally. And before anything else, you have to find out whether the desire is even theirs. And sometimes the answer is quiet. I've been thinking about this for a long time and I finally decided to try. That's often the most stable readiness of all, not urgent and not reactive, just ready. None of this is pass or fail. When desire is borrowed, your job is to find the one underneath it. A man whose wife booked his session to stop smoking may not care about quitting for her, but when you ask what it actually costs him, something shifts. He talks about his daughter, about not being able to keep up with her at the park, about feeling winded at 42, and that's his desire. It was there the whole time, he just hadn't been asked for it in a way that bypassed the obligation. When grounding is missing, regulation comes before anything else. The flooded client isn't a problem, she's information, and your role isn't to push through the intake, but to help the nervous system settle enough to receive. Offering options is one of the fastest ways to do that, because choice restores a sense of control, and control is usually what flooding took away. When belief is missing, you don't argue, you demonstrate something small, a moment where the body responds to something imagined before the analytical mind can object. You're not looking for conviction. You're looking for a crack in the certainty that nothing will help. Readiness isn't something you assess once at the start and move on from. A client who walks in grounded and open can flood the moment a charged topic surfaces, and a client who arrives skeptical can soften 20 minutes in when they finally feel heard by someone who isn't trying to fix them. A client whose desire seemed clear at booking can arrive ambivalent because something changed during the week. You're tracking this continuously, not formally, the way you track everything in a session, by staying present and noticing what shifts. When readiness drops mid-session, you adjust. You slow down, you ground, you check in, and you don't push through because you had a plan. The plan serves the client. The client doesn't serve the plan. You follow readiness, not agenda. When a session goes well, it's tempting to credit the technique, the induction, the suggestion that landed, the question that opened something up. Most of the time, though, the session went well because the conditions were right. The desire was theirs, the nervous system could receive, and the door was open. Reading those conditions before you start is the difference between a session that lands and a session that doesn't. And that is the layer most certifications skip. They teach you what to do. They don't teach you to read whether the room is ready for you to do it. By the end of this episode, you should know 3 things: what readiness actually looks like in a client, the 3 conditions that have to be present for a session to work, and how to track those conditions when they shift. If any of those landed differently than you expected, that's the book going deeper. Next episode is chapter 19, Language and the Subconscious. The words you use, the words your client uses, and why what sounds clear to you can land completely differently in their system. My advanced hypnosis training manual is on Amazon now for purchase. Link below. If this changed how you think about the work, subscribe. New episode every week.